Jean-Baptiste Leloup Dubois of French America was widely credited for inventing the dish. Not being a professional chef himself, he instead lived remotely in the woods as a hermit. Those who had contact with him considered him odd, short of temper, poor of character, and bad of manners, most likely insane, and definitely an alcoholic. Ultimately, it was discovered by authorities that Jean-Baptiste Leloup Dubois was the serial killer that the press had named Le Profanateur Québécois. He was arrested and subsequently convicted for the absurdly grotesque murders of at least 20 individuals, most of which he had partially devoured. He was sentenced to 20 consecutive life sentences. It was not until the later years in the first of his life sentences of incarceration did he begin to speak, and it was to only one of the many eager journalists wanting to hear his story, Henri Barbier. It was to Barbier that Jean-Baptiste first discussed how he was continuously harassed and woken up by noisy songbirds, what he called gros chanteurs crétins, stupid fat singers, living in a tree above his remote shack. In order to exact revenge on the little songbirds, he would first capture them with a net and place them in a cage. Then, he would scream into the cages at the birds for hours, not allowing them to sleep. He would mock them by loudly imitating their chirps and songs, intent on causing the birds as much auditory distress as possible. He would not feed the birds, and as such the birds starved to death. Jean-Baptiste was not satisfied that justice had been served, and he was hungry, so he cooked and ate the bird, and much to his surprise they tasted delightful. His vendetta incomplete, he captured more songbirds and screamed and mocked them for weeks, but this time offered them grains and water. The birds would eat the grains and drink the water and live longer to sustain more verbal abuse from Leloup Dubois. Jean-Baptiste, however, was still not satisfied and began to dislike how the birds would look at him. He perceived them to be mocking him with their eyes. To correct this, Leloup Dubois used tweezers which had been heated red-hot to extinguish the birds' eyes. Blinding the birds unexpectedly resulted in them gorging themselves on grain. Once again Jean-Baptiste was angered at this, and he saw it as yet another display of disrespect from the birds that they would stuff themselves full in such petty enmity on the grains he generously offered to them, for having been merely blinded. Himself now in blinded rage, Jean-Baptiste grabbed the bird and tossed it across the shack and stormed out, presumably to continue his series of killings. Upon his return, Leloup Dubois discovered that the rude, gluttonous songbird he had tossed earlier landed in his barrel of cognac and had apparently splashed about, making a big mess before it drowned to death. He was hungry and decided to cook and eat the bird, only this time the bird was remarkably more delicious. It was juicy, crispy, and the time it spent marinating to death in cognac gave the meat more depth of flavor. He ate the bird whole, bones crunching, internal organs bursting his mouth, imparting such amazing flavors and textures. His hatred for the birds, though, only intensified. The bird had made such a mess with its struggle in the cognac that Jean-Baptiste took this as another personal affront. He had many reasons to hate these birds. He wanted to make the birds learn once and for all that they had made serious mistake by crossing him. For this, he captured his next little bird with a net and climbed the tree, retrieving the bird's nest along with its chicks. This time, he made sure that the chicks watched. He blinded the mother, yelling and mocking it and its chicks. When the bird was properly gorged and fattened, he removed it from the cage, bound its wings and legs with twine, and placed it in a saucepan with hot cognac, not too hot. He wanted the death to be a slow and painful drowning. He brought the bird's chicks out to watch their mother drown to death. He made sure they watched every second of it. Upon its death, the bird was seasoned with salt, pepper, and herbs collected from the woods and placed into a frying pan, where it was cooked and crisped in its own gluttonous fats. Once cooked, he picked up the cooked mother and ate it whole in front of her chicks. He noted that the bird had never tasted better. He was so satisfied by this appetizer that he went out that same night and killed and partially devoured 2 more people. He would later eat the chicks after they were properly yelled at, blinded, fattened, and drowned. He continued this practice until he was captured. When asked what he called his culinary creation, he said he would like to call it fauvette gras, fattened warbler.